WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wisi.org/donate or by texting WisI to 44321.
Representative Joel Kitchens of Sturgeon Bay is the Republican candidate in the 1st Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Representative Kitchens, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Well, thanks. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you for participating in our candidate interviews. I want to start by asking you, what's your campaign's key message? Why are you running for re-election?
Yeah, I guess I'd rather, campaigns are such a short little period of time, I'd rather just talk about the theme of my service in government, I guess, really. The United States has always been the land of opportunity. I think there's always been more opportunity for upward mobility than any country in history. So, when I look at legislation, that's what I want to advance. I want every person in Wisconsin to have a chance to succeed. I'm chairman of the Education Committee, and that's what drives my legislation. Things like the Right to Read Act that I authored last session, I think is going to give kids an opportunity to succeed. We're not going to guarantee that everybody's going to succeed, but we want everybody, if they work hard and they have some talent, to be able to succeed. And that also drives my philosophy towards dealing with business and that kind of thing. I want to make it easy for people, for young people to start up a business and that kind of thing. So that's what really, I guess, drives my whole service.
If you're reelected, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to move forward?
Yeah, there are a couple of bills, and during this season, my staff is working on some of the ideas that we have to get them ready to go. I think one of the things I want to work on is a ban of cell phones within classrooms. I think that really takes away from learning and cheats our kids. So that's going to be one thing I'll work on. Last session, I was co-author of a bill to remove income tax from retirement savings. And I would like to bring that up again. Governor Evers vetoed it last time. I'd like to take another shot at that. I think that would be, it doesn't cost that much, and it would be really beneficial in keeping our senior citizens in our state.
If you're reelected, you're entering the legislature during a biennial budget session. Mm-hmm. The state's projected to have more than a $3 billion surplus. What would be, you say, your top 2 priorities for use of that surplus?
Yeah, I think with the surplus, we always have to be careful we don't, create a budget deficit going forward, a structural deficit. So we want to spend that extra money because it came primarily off of COVID relief money. So we want to be sure to spend that on things that are one-time expenses. We did use part of it last time on the Right to Read Act, and we may need to put some more into that. But that's not going to be something that is going to be long-term, once we get that instituted. Things like infrastructure, paying off some of our debt from that, those kinds of things where it's one time and it's not committing us to large amount of future spending.
You don't mention tax cuts or tax reform in that answer. Is that a priority for you in your campaign?
Yeah, it is. And, I had mentioned the one on retirement savings. So there's that. Middle class tax cut we tried to put through last time, which was also vetoed. I do think it's important that we keep our tax structure as, tax as little as possible, basically. When you look at the states that are losing population, California, New York, Minnesota, Illinois, it's because they have high taxes. So we're competing with these other states for workers, and I think we need to keep our tax burden low.
You mentioned K-12 education as a priority for you. Mm-hmm. You're chair currently of the Education Committee. What is going well in K-12 education, and what really needs to change?
Yeah, I think overall our education is going pretty well. Our rankings across the country, compared to other states, are actually pretty good. I think we need to work on. There are some things we need to change within the funding formula, to make that more fair. And I certainly think that we need to address the achievement gaps that we have. Our African American students scored dead last in the country in reading, and that's, again, with the Right to Read Act. We hope to improve part of that, but that's always going to be, a big challenge for us is the minorities and getting them, achieving at a more acceptable level.
What about higher education? Four-year colleges, two-year colleges, technical colleges. What should be the legislature's focus on higher education?
Well, that's always a tough issue, and we had the big controversy over diversity, equity, and inclusion positions last time. I do think we need to hold them accountable. I think that too often they don't work with us. They just think we should leave them alone and give them more money. We do need to adequately fund them. We certainly have a great university system here in Wisconsin. I think down the line we need to look at merging some campuses, but that's always politically going to be really difficult because we need to be efficient and use our money, as efficiently as possible.
What do you see as the state's biggest workforce development challenge, and how should we address it?
Yeah, that's a tough issue, and it goes across the country. Obviously, we need to keep more young people in the state, and I think a lot of that does go to education. I think the money we put into broadband, I think is going to help keep some of those people here. But the tax burden is a big part of it. As I mentioned, it's pretty much a linear relationship when you look at tax burden and whether states are gaining or losing population. I think we're 23rd, which is better than a lot of states, certainly better than I mentioned Minnesota and Illinois, our neighbors. But we need to always be conscious of that.
Another workforce question for you. Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. These investments also provide an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
I'd have to look at it on an individual basis, to be honest. I'm reluctant to put those kinds of controls in there because I think sometimes we end up paying more when we put those requirements in place. But, it's certainly something to be considered. I would just have to see the specifics of it.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this, and what do you think should be done about it?
Yeah, I think it happens in a lot of industries. Certainly, we see it in the tourism industry where there are people being paid cash and that kind of thing. I think we need to monitor that and crack down on it. I think we need to have a level playing field. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but everyone needs to pay their share so we can keep it, keep it low for everyone. But it also, as you mentioned, some of the things like Social Security down the line, if they have not been paying into that, there are just a lot of ramifications to that. So it's certainly something we need to monitor and crack down on.
Affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some have proposed government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue that keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Rent control, or building more rentals, or other?
Yeah, I would never support rent control. I've just seen it in cities where they have tried that. There's no incentive for landlords to improve their properties. It does create a shortage. I believe in the free market. It's supply and demand, and it messes that up very badly. So I would never support that. I do support, and we had a package last time where we provided incentives for construction companies to build workforce housing, and also where we got around some of the red tape that sometimes surrounds that makes it very difficult. So I want to keep going down that path. I want that to be a starting point. But it's not, people say affordable housing. This isn't just low income housing. I know certainly in Door County we have a challenge, just affordable housing for teachers and nurses and things like that. So it's obviously a huge problem.
Moving on to health care. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
Yeah, I'm on the board of the Door County Medical Center, so it's something I deal with a good bit. I do think that we need to increase our Medicaid reimbursement in Wisconsin, but I also think that we need to educate people. There are a lot of people that are right on the just above the poverty line that right now are uninsured, but they can go to the Affordable Care Act and exchange, and really a lot of them get good health insurance for pennies a month. So I think we need to educate them on that, and that would really help out the hospitals, because right now our Medicaid reimbursement, it's about 2/3 of the cost of it. So we're losing money on every single patient that they see. And again, if they have real insurance, doctors will see them. Right now there are a lot of doctors that don't want to see Medicaid patients because again, they lose money. I also want to continue, right now we have a program that treats the rural critical access hospitals a little differently with their Medicaid reimbursement. I think that's really important in our rural areas where they very often have very high rates of Medicaid patients, and we need to keep them in business. People need to have access to health care close to home.
What about mental health care? What are you hearing on that issue in your district, and are there ways that we can address it better?
Yeah, it's a growing issue everywhere, and particularly with young people. It was already bad, but I think the pandemic made things much worse. So I think we need to include that, and I know in our hospital we are, increasing our mental health services and that kind of thing. And I think, the Medical College of Wisconsin, now that we have here in the Green Bay area, they're really focusing a lot on turning out psychiatrists. So it is an area where we need to put a lot more energy. I authored a bill a few years ago that allowed mental health providers to go into the schools and treat young people there, and that's worked very well. That they're much more likely to get treatment if the treatment comes to them rather than their parents having to have an appointment and take them out of school. And we know that with young people, if we treat them early, the chances of success are much greater.
What about abortion policy? How should Wisconsin move forward on that issue?
Yeah, so obviously a tough issue. It's a moral issue, though. Personally, I am pro-life, but I recognize that we all have our different opinions on that. When does life begin? We all recognize that a child, once it's born, is a life, and that's murder if you kill it. But when does that begin? Is it a month before, and all that kind of thing? So last session, we passed a bill in the Assembly, the Senate didn't take it up, that would have asked the public if they want to lower it from 20 weeks to 14 weeks. Where it's legal. And I think that's the route that we need to go. I think
a referendum?
Yeah, I think the people need to decide that. I don't think politicians should decide it. And when I say politicians, I include the Wisconsin Supreme Court, because they're politicians as much as I am. And their grasp on when life begins is no more relevant than mine is. So I think the public needs to decide that. I'll also point out, I have authored the last 3 sessions the bill to make birth control much more accessible by allowing pharmacists to prescribe it. Unfortunately, we've never quite had the votes to get it through the Senate. But I think things like that prevent pregnancy in the first place so that women aren't faced with that choice, I think is very important.
Moving on to transportation policy. What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that they are addressed, and for the state to keep on schedule with reconstruction of our aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
Yeah, well, we have the challenges as much, just like everywhere, but...
Yes, feel free to keep talking with some added water.
Okay, but obviously you hear about that all the time. When I go to local government meetings, they're always advocating, for more money to go into transportation, and we need to do that. One program that was implemented this last session was the Agricultural Road Improvement Program, because we have a lot of the big farms with big equipment that are tearing up the roads. So I like that. I like that we need to put more money to local government to help the roads. And again, back to that budget surplus, I think that's a prime area where we should be spending some of that money to upgrade our infrastructure, our bridges, and that kind of thing. We certainly can't just keep kicking it down the road.
PFAS and water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites, including folks in Northeast Wisconsin. Do you see this as an important issue, and how do you propose addressing it?
Yeah, and that's been a challenge too. And groundwater in my area has, especially Kewaunee County was sort of the poster child for contaminated groundwater. Now with that, we've made a lot of great progress with dealing with the farmers by working together with them and having cooperation. And our groundwater there actually is better than the state average. So that's worked there. PFAS obviously is a new thing that we're dealing with. I do think that the federal government needs to step up and provide us with the standards and that kind of thing, because I just don't think we are equipped on the state level to be determining those things. So we really need them to step up. But we had a bill last time that it's just a controversial issue, and no matter what we do to a lot of people, it's never going to be enough. But we did, I think it was $125 billion we spent on cleanup on PFAS, and I think we're going to need to keep working off of that. And PFAS isn't going to be the last contaminant that we find. I think there are things out there right now that are probably carcinogenic that we're dealing with that we don't even know about. So we need to be able to cooperate with the Environmental Protection Agency and the federal government on those.
We're down to our last two questions.
Okay.
How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
Yeah, I think it I mean, she's a nice lady, but I think it really comes down to experience. I think that I have life experience as a veterinarian, as a business owner, and now my 10 years in the legislature. And I think I have been very effective in bringing forward my constituents, their concerns. There were about 4 bills this time that I passed that came directly from my constituents. So I think I have that experience and I know how to get things done. So I guess I would see that as our major difference.
Last question.
Okay.
Let's say you're reelected and you get a magic wand you can use in the state capitol to resolve one issue in a way that brings parties together. What would that issue be?
Well, real quickly, I'm going to give sort of two, but I would like people just obviously to work together better and to get over the issues that we have in doing that. But the other one I would, and I mentioned it with education, my biggest concern for the future of Wisconsin is so many young people we have that are trapped in that cycle of poverty and generation after generation. So, and I mentioned the Right to Read Act about 5 times now, but that's one step in it. But I think that if we could do something to lift them up, to get, bring them into the mainstream and have them be, successful, self-sufficient adults, I think that would be the biggest thing, because it's just that really, if there's one thing that keeps me up at night, it's worrying about that growing number of people that are just dependent on government.
Well, thank you, Representative Joel Kitchens of Sturgeon Bay, the Republican candidate in the 1st Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Representative Joel Kitchens, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thanks, always a pleasure.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.